Talo Falava and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Sweetie Fatswesi. I am a community organizer with Utopia Seattle, and my pronouns are she, hers. I also identify as Fafafine, Leiti, and trans women of color. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce my co-host to you.
Thanks, Tweety. Talanoa, everyone. My name is Adriana Suluai. I use she, her pronouns. I am a proud Samoan Fa'afafine. Here at Utopia Seattle, I am the Community Engagement Coordinator. A lot of my work aligns around advocacy work around LGBTQI, especially for our queer, trans, Pacific Islander community members. I also involved with our direct service piece of my work. Sorry.
God bless you, child. But before we go on, we'd like to acknowledge the land that we are currently occupying.
We would like to acknowledge that we are on ceded ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Tuamish tribe. We would like to acknowledge their ancestors and those who are still here, continuing to bring light to their ancient heritage.
We also want to acknowledge the political uprising around the country against police brutality and the injustices that continue to oppress Black people and Black communities. Utopia Seattle stands in solidarity with the Black community and will continue to resist against racism so that we are all liberated. At this moment, we'd like to keep our program going. Thank you so much for bearing with us. We would like to tell you a little bit about Talanoa. Today's topic is QTPI, the Census, mental health counts. The reason why we came up with this topic in particular is because we have about 6 days left before the expiration date on the 2020 census. This is our last opportunity to get our loved ones, our friends, anyone that you're in connection with counted onto the 2020 census. The deadline to respond is September 30th, which is actually next Thursday? Correct me if I'm wrong. Next Wednesday. Sorry about that. So yeah, we need to respond to the census so that we get federal funding that comes back into our communities, that support our BIPOC communities, support trans people, support LGBT communities, support Black communities specifically, and that no one is undercounted, underserved, underrepresented.
And these grants also fund our mental and behavioral health programs. And it is very important that we are getting counted so we can see what is currently working, what we can do to better these services, especially for our youth and especially for our adults.
Mm-hmm. So we decided to kill two birds with one stone. We're going to jump right in and share a little PSA announcement for you. There goes the train. So yeah, sit back and relax and enjoy this little PSA announcement. Thank you. The census helps to support me and my family members.
Census counts youth members.
Pacifica People Matters on 2020 Census.
Census, I'm counted. I'm significant.
I count.
I count.
I count.
I count.
I count. I count.
I count.
I count.
I count.
I count.
I count. I count.
We all count!
We count! Thank you so much. Special shout out to our community members for joining with us to put that fun PSA together. But we've got a great show lined up for you today. We're going to take this opportunity to introduce our special guests for this evening.
We have quite a panel. Mm-hmm. They're pretty top notch at the line of their game. So I'll start off with introducing our first panelist. She received her PhD in anthropology from the University of Washington, Seattle in 2019. She is the first Mahu Wahine to receive a PhD and is also a first generation scholar today. She is a board member of KAHEA, Hawaiian Environmental Alliance, and the whole Pono Peace Project. I would like everybody to welcome Dr. Kalani Young. Hey, girl. Hi, Dr. Kalani.
Aloha.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for inviting me to this panel today. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking time out of your schedule, especially tuning in from Oahu, to be with us this evening.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
How about you? Let's start off by telling everyone who's joining us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so currently I teach at the University of Hawaii and Hawaii Pacific University. And as you mentioned, I do work predominantly in the Native Hawaiian community around issues of decolonization, protecting sacred sites, and anti-racist and decolonial trans work. So it's so great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We're going to invite our next panel, which I have the honor of bringing onto the screen. Mr. Joseph Saya is a Fa'afafine and is a fierce advocate for the QT BIPOC communities. He is critically concerned with political systems that cripple or erase the voice and leadership of NHPI communities, and will continue to provide sole labor in re-envisioning what it means for NHPI communities and families belonging and established cultural home within the state of Washington. A round of applause for Joseph. Hi, Joseph, how are you?
Hi, everybody. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Loving the new look.
The Samoan avatar.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to introduce yourself to our viewers this evening?
Sure. So Joseph here. I use all pronouns. Executive Director of the Pacific Islander Community Association. Also sit on the Utopia Seattle board. Proudly Fa'afafine. And a lot of my work is really anti-racist community organizing, really equipping Pacific Islander peoples to really develop our political voice and find cultural home and do all that beautiful stuff that I think we're all able to do with all of the gifts that we have. So happy to be here.
Thank you so much.
We're glad to have you here, Joe. So I would like to bring on our next panelist. She's quite a young lady. She is currently pursuing her Bachelor of Arts at the University of Washington, Tacoma, majoring in ethics, gender and labor studies, and ESL teaching certification. She has been an active supporter for the Black Lives Matter movement, participating in countless rallies and march alongside the Pacific Northwest. A little input on that: she was not the lady that was in the back waiting aside. She was always up front and center. Is none other than Natia Manaya. Hi, Natia.
Hey, sister girl. How's it going?
Hi, everybody. Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm
You look
doing
beautiful
quite
this
well,
evening.
quite good.
Look like a movie star. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone?
Huh? Oh, thank you. I'm Natia Manaya. I wear a lot of hats in my community. I work, literally and professionally. I am a paraeducator for the Gulf Park School District, a behavior technician, and a job coach in King, Pierce, and Thurston County. So I work a lot with individuals with special needs, and I am a blog writer for it's called Diary of M. It's pretty much about my life before transitioning. My pronouns are she, her. I just thought I'd say that. And yeah, that's me.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. We have one more guest on our agenda, but we'll be right back all together for a very important panel discussion. At this time, I'd like to introduce Ms. Virginia Luca, who is a program specialist senior for the Pacific Islander community within Multnomah County Health Department. She currently is on the board of the Asian Pacific American Network of Oregon and Living Island, and the Pacifica Leads Program Coordinator for our sister chapter, Utopia PDX, also known as Utopia Portland. Welcome, Virginia. How are you?
Virginia.
Hi, Ali. Thanks for having me. I'm good. How about yourselves?
We're very thankful, and very thankful that you're able to join us this evening. We love the whole outfit.
You can borrow anytime, honey.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and share a little bit more about yourself so our viewers can get to know you?
Sure. My name is Virginia Ngelma Pedro Rivard Luca. I was born in the island of Palau, raised on the island of Guam before moving to Oregon. I use she and they pronouns. I'm a queer Palauan person. And fun fact, I love to cosplay Star Trek characters. So that's me.
Oh my gosh, with Halloween coming up too, I'm excited. Who are you going to be?
Oh gosh, I have a closet full, honey. I just have to pick something. I'm not sure yet. I haven't decided.
Well, we'll definitely have some major closets see what we can come up with for myself.
Yes.
Whoa. Okay, let's get this conversation going. We've got some pretty important topics to cover. I think before we do, oh, sorry about that. Here we go. Yeah, we'd like to start off the interview process. We'll start off with question number 1. Let's see here. And these questions are open for anyone to respond. Don't feel obligated to. What am I trying to say? It's okay to say no if you're not comfortable responding to a specific question. That's totally fine. We respect your perspective. But let's start us off a little bit, and I'll ask you guys to please share with us why it is important for you to speak on the importance of census in queer and trans Pacific Islander communities. I'll start off by directing this straight off to Joseph, if you would do the honors, please.
Oh, thanks for putting me on the spot. So, when we're thinking about Indigenous, queer, and trans people, right, Pacific Islanders, Native Two-Spirit people, not only do we struggle with white supremacy and that layer of oppression, right? You also introduce in heterosexism, transphobia, homophobia, and how that's embedded through the church. A lot of our communities are at the intersection of poverty, at the intersection of not being erased, right? So it's so critical for us to be at the center, right? When we do any interventions, there's this concept about targeted universalism. When you focus on queer and trans people, especially Indigenous people and Black people, if you are able to count them and serve them well, you're really looking at serving everybody well, right? And so it's so critical for us to be at the center of the census as far as all of the resources. I'll pass it on to my siblings.
Wow, thank you. That's a wonderful answer, Joe. Virginia, it looks like you had something you wanted to spill out.
Thank you so much for getting us started. I think as someone who does a lot of community engagement and research, people are always asking me, how many folks are Pacific Islanders in Oregon? And I always have to say, I rely on data that's 10 years old. So we need to make sure that we are counted. We need to make sure that it's disaggregated, that we can clearly identify exactly our ethnic group and not be, jumbled up in some numbers. And yes, that's important, but also all the stories that go behind it, right? Making sure that we're constantly bridging that together. We're not just numbers, we're stories, we're lives, we're people, and we have to make sure that we are always heard. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I really have to sort of follow up with that too, and agree that, the data that reflects PI communities are 10 years old. Recently, I was contacted to provide data for PI residents here in Washington State, and I couldn't sort of come up with any exact number around that because a lot of folks are still hesitant to respond to the census. And there's so many reasons that we've covered in part one of our Talanoa, or the last one, QTPI had a census session, as to why what those reasons are. But the crucial thing is that the census is in existence to work to serve our communities, and we can't get the services or the support that we need from the federal government if we're not being visible. So that's a very important topic. I mean, I'm happy that you brought that up.
Yeah. Natia, being like a community member that works, especially with a lot of our youth members, why do you think it's also important for census in queer and trans Pacific Islanders?
I'm sorry, do you want to ever say that again? Sorry.
Why do you think it's important for you to speak on the importance of census in queer and
Did you
trans
want to repeat the
Pacific
question?
Islanders community?
Well, I think me being here is very important because I'm someone who didn't necessarily know too much about the census. I really wasn't involved in any of like thing that goes into the government, especially politics, until pretty much the Trump administration had gone into office. So I think it's important for me to be here because I represent those who are pretty much unaware of the census and how important it is. Especially, I would love to be more educated, especially working in a field of education. So that's just my take on it. I know just the gist of what the census is about, but how it's affecting my community that I'm a part of, I am just I'm not really up to date with everything. And I think it's important that, me being here. I think it's important that I'm acknowledging like my own faults or of not educating myself properly on it. So I look forward to this conversation.
Awesome. That's really amazing.
And that's perfectly normal too, because a lot of people have little to no experience, or are just sort of brushing themselves up on the census and the importance of it towards the ending at this point, moving on to the deadline. Better to have some than none, I would say, but it's great that you're able to, that you're willing to come into this space and sort of continue the conversation with everyone else. I'm going to turn over to Dr. Kalani to see if you have any insights on the matter.
Well, it appears that over $1.9 trillion was last issued, according to the census, to address funding for housing, medical, education, at the levels of the federal government, at the levels of the state government, at the levels of the local government. So while people feel that their voting has very little effect on the system, right? There's a lack of efficacy and belief in their power to vote. I think it's important that people know that for the census, when you put in the census, the information about your household and who lives there, that information is directly tied to funding, right? That supports your communities, especially communities of color. And for QTPI's, queer and trans Pacific Islanders, 30% of us experience things like precarious housing, needing access to healthcare, needing access to educational resources. And so this funding is really important, whether or not we, trust in this system currently. So it is really important that we engage with the census. In a way, it's kind of, it's really important because it's an alternative to to the voting system and the lack of efficacy that people are experiencing right now in that system. So you can think of the census as the people's, access rights to resources and funding.
That's great, because especially for the queer, not just the queer and trans community, I think everyone in general who's migrating to the U.S., they would come in to, begin a lifestyle here with very little means. And so another example that they would access to get resources would be like EBT, food stamps, public transportation, or childcare
Yep.
assistance. And these are some of the things that, you know, that people don't realize affect them way more than, you know, it should. And so that's why I've become really passionate about doing census outreach work, because I know how much our community, our queer and trans Pacific Islander communities, our Pacifica communities, our BIPOC communities, I know how much everyone needs this type of support. And it's not easy when you're starting out here on your own. So, I mean, respond to the census and do it. I mean, do it already. All it takes is just 10 minutes, and it really doesn't take any more than that much effort to bring the changes that you want to have within your communities and your household. And you can also do this while you're at it.
Yeah. Right.
When you really get what we want. Okay.
True that.
Our next question will go on to say, in what ways do you think the census data could impact mental health services for the queer and trans Pacific Islander community? I will direct this question to Virginia.
Thank you. So I myself, I live with anxiety and depression. I have 2 kiddos who are trans boys. You know, we go to therapy, you know, we take meds, which means we really need to be able to go to providers who know how to serve us, right? It was really, really hard for me. I was really trying really hard to find a Pacific Islander therapist. I was really trying hard to find counselors who can help my trans boys. And that was really hard. You know, I really needed that cultural sensitivity. And I think, you know, with when I think of census and when I think of why it's important to us, I think if people can see just how many of us live here and need services, hopefully that encourages more people like us to be able to get into programs in order to get training, in order to serve people like us, right? I've had to just deal with other providers who don't look like me, and I do a lot of explaining of what I need. And that's tiring, right? It's tiring talking about my trauma. It's tiring talking about, you know, why my life is the way it is to someone who has never heard about, you know, colonization in Palau, that we were colonized by Germany, Japan, United States, and the ongoing, you know, colonization, right? And the militarization of our islands and all of that. And that's part of my trauma. And that's part of the reason why I take medicine, right? So just, you know, when I think of systems in place, you know, if we know that there's a number of folks who are identifying in a certain ethnic group, then we understand their history. We understand that intergenerational trauma that comes, you know, with these folks and the way that we immigrated here. And also, for example, you know, my mother is Palau, so which means she's a COFA state citizen, which means she doesn't get a lot of like federal funding dollars. And so they'll know how to help her, right? So I think just knowing who we are, knowing our history, also knowing what languages we need, right? For example, we have a large population of Marshallese in Salem, Oregon, to the fact that we have to have translators in the school districts, which also means we need translators in healthcare, right? Even when COVID happened, we had to fight and ask for, you know, our counties, our Oregon Health Authority to publish COVID-19 response flyers in various languages because we also need to know. So just, you know, with mental health, I want to be very open and honest about my journey. And I know that my journey is very different from other folks. But to me, I live every day. And so it is really important to me that we're heard.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
That was very enlightening. Yeah. Just hearing the conversation about like the need for resources around Pacific Islanders with translators and all that stuff. So that way they can be inputted into our healthcare system and especially our schools. Because, you know, when we migrate here, you know, some of our brothers and sisters who migrate here are not very fluent in English because English is just a second language. And when we have access to that resource, it just makes everything so much better. And knowledge is power, and some of these things that it'll be much more better to know in our own language so that way we can understand versus us trying to have to like go through a dictionary just to find out what a word means. Well, thank you. Thank you, Virginia, for that. Tati, what are your thoughts on that conversation?
Could you repeat the question, please? I'm sorry, I was just listening.
In what way do you think the census data could impact mental health services for the queer Trans-Pacific Islander community?
Well, it could definitely help by providing funding to different organizations that are out there that depend upon federal funding to keep their programs going. Amazing work being done by nonprofit organizations like Utopia. And also, I think it's really important, just like what Virginia was saying, to have that representation and be able to have your voice counted means that there's a need, it addresses a need for representation in the professoriate or in the professional world that reflects the needs of the community. So I think that's really important.
Thank you so much. And I would like to, I'd like to sort of throw it off to, or toss it over to Natia. I'm interested to see to hear about your insights on the topic,
especially from the educator's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I agree with both Dr. Young and Virginia about, especially about, I know for me, I went to therapy for a long time and my therapist didn't look like me. And it was really discouraging at times when I would talk about very personal issues to me regarding like my family. And I would just get like the response of no understanding me of where I was coming from. It was just more like yeah, I totally know how you're feeling and you feel sad. It felt so scripted and it really discouraged me for a while where I stopped going and I was just dealing with my own issues behind closed doors. And I think it's important that the census could possibly bring funding and putting money in the right places to best serve the community. Because there's people out there who really need support and they're not getting it. And there's a lot of people out there I can imagine that are like me who are just hiding behind closed doors because they don't feel like they can connect with somebody. And I didn't feel like that. So I just stayed hidden. And I'm so open about it that I suffered in silence for a long time. So I just feel like funding is like very important and to go to those programs. Yeah.
I wanna sort of ask you a follow-up question, and forgive me, for bringing this up, but you mentioned about, you mentioned that you had a blog that you shared online about your stories coming out and going through your transition. Would you say that served as an outlet for you therapeutically to sort of overcome some of the mental health wellness issues that you've been going through at that period?
It has. That was one thing that I talked about a couple of years ago when I was meeting with my therapist, and I was talking about like I should start writing and the things that were going on in my head. So when I started Diary of M, initially was for that, and every time I post something, even on like Instagram or Facebook, everything that I post it's from the heart, it's genuine, and it's from my own experience. Because beyond the diary that I've written, I've shared about my sexual assault that happened back in 2012 at the University of Washington, Seattle. So I've just been very vocal. And when I wrote Diary of M, I wanted to put it all together into one into just one space where, or one site where you could just have access to everything. So for me, every time I put something out, I felt like I wasn't holding on to that trauma anymore. And for those who have focused on, for those who have followed me and followed like the diary, I stopped a couple years ago, and every time I write something and every time I feel I could post something, it's because I've come to terms with that it's happened to me. So me taking this time off, I'm dealing with things that I have not come to terms with, trauma, things that have happened to me that I just don't know how to navigate life. Like I feel like my life is at a standstill right now because I cannot get over it, or not necessarily get over it. I cannot. I'm not. I just. I don't know how to explain it. I can't. I don't want to own it. I don't want to like face it. I don't want to face that that's happened to me. So diary. Yeah, it's been very helpful with like mental health and my journey to be strong enough to put out things that are happening through because I'm not perfect, and I make it a point all over social media to put it out there that I'm not a perfect person, and I want people to understand that with social media, which is me, there are people out there who are authentic and real, and I like to think that whatever I put something out there, it's from the heart and it's from a real place. And so, yeah, with my mental health, it's been a journey. I will say that it has been quite a journey. It's been a long road, and I'm still on that road.
Well, I tip my hat off to you for your bravery. I mean, it's one thing to write something, especially something so personal about yourself, and then it's a totally different thing to go out there and share it with the world. I mean, that just invites so much feedback from different perspectives, whether people support you or not supportive. But your bravery to be able to do that is very empowering for me to hear. And I hope it's an inspiration to others who are viewing this live feed to find positive outlets to sort of let go of things that you're sort of going through in life. That not everything needs to be so seriously taken to the heart, to the soul. I mean, find a positive outlet to help overcome your strength. And I mean, one thing that we lack here in this discussion is having therapeutic representation for people, by people who support us, for us. You know what I mean? And so definitely, once again, go get your census done ASAP. Like, no joke. Joseph, would you like to, I'd like to pick your brain also on what you think on the subject.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Natia, and appreciate your courage and sharing your experience. And I know it's not an easy thing to do. So my best wishes on your journey. And, we're all on a journey, right? As queer and trans people on a journey of healing. And when you think about our communities suffering the rates of homelessness at 40%, right? Queer and trans babies that are being pushed out to the streets. Think about all of the social support that they need, right? SNAP, Medicaid, and even mental health. And, from my experience in working with youth and young adults experiencing homelessness, the mental health support that they have, it's one counselor to like 50 kids, right? And that's a light load, right? So you think about all of the ways that we really need these public funds to really build the mental health infrastructure, so that when we are at the pits, right? When our families and our churches and our communities have pushed us out, and we can access some of these resources, right? So that we are able to survive that critical age from teenage to young adult. Yeah, I can't tell you how many queer and trans babies, right, that I've come across that need that support. And I think being counted only, just helps, identify the population that is suffering, right? So important to do the census for us.
Yes, it's very important.
Wow, yeah. Just when you said that the ratio between one counselor with 50 students, that's just completely unacceptable. That is such a huge caseload for one person that someone will always fall through the cracks. And that is unacceptable, especially when it comes to our youth, because our youth is our future. They are going to build our community and uplift our community when we have long sit down and let them take on the work. Yes, go get counted.
Well, I feel like we should probably take a little break just to sort of lighten the mood a little bit. We do have another Census PSA video that we would like to share with everyone this evening. We'll be right back to continue our questioning segment, and then we'll continue on to take on a little Q&A from our viewers there at home. So make sure you get your questions ready and submit them on the live chat, and then our tech team in the background will work on getting that back to us. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. The 2020 census is nearly over. We have until September 30th to get counted.
The census data will be used to fund hundreds of programs that will benefit our loved ones,
Such as medical services, so that we can continue to receive treatment and care.
We're back on.
Are we back already? Oh, one sec. I was like, that was quick.
I was like, I think we're still live. So I don't think we went anywhere.
Hi, my name is Olose Oriana, and I'm a current student at Eastern Washington University, and I'm here to remind you to complete your census questionnaire. As a college student, the census has been a benefiting factor for me through the grants and scholarships that allow me to further my education. The census helps higher institutions fund different clubs and organizations such as the Hawaii Club, which I currently serve as vice president. Through these clubs and organizations, we're able to network and build connections that could potentially help with future job opportunities. Lastly, the census helps colleges and universities determine employment options for students that may need that extra support while attending classes. This performance was originally meant to be performed at our annual luau, but due to COVID restrictions, I've decided to share it with you all virtually. Enjoy!
More.
We're back on.
All right.
Oh, that was so beautiful. Well, that was my niece, Oriana Louie. She learned it from me. No, I wish.
Wow.
Are you sure it's your natto? Yes. But shout out to Lose Oriana for putting together that beautiful performance. Once again, it's important to count all of us in our communities, especially our youth. I mean, they go through the education system, and then, you know, just like herself, she relies on federal funding to help her throughout her educational career. So don't forget to count your children in the 2020 census too. Even if they're newborns, they count also.
They all count.
Yes, everyone counts.
So moving on, I would like to move on to our next questions for our Talanoa. This question is, what would you say are some behavioral health issues that our queer Pacific Islanders are facing? I want to start off with Dr. Young.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you to Natia and Virginia for sharing your personal stories. I think it's very empowering to share your stories. And even when your voice shakes while you share it, it's good to have the courage to push through and share those stories, because you never know whose life you could be saving. And with that said, I think our communities are facing just an overwhelming amount of issues currently, especially under this administration, with the increase in violence against people who are Black, who are Indigenous, immigrant communities, you know. So I think some of the mental health issues that we're facing, I definitely trace it back to colonization. And I think that's a huge mental health issue of our time. And I think one of the ways that we can engage with decolonizing, right, therapy and counseling and health, is by addressing the issue of colonization and how it's impacted our islands, right, especially as Pacific Islanders. And so I see that as a major issue today in Hawaii in particular. I'm speaking from a standpoint in Hawaii, though I, lived in Washington State for a number of years. And coming back home, from the diaspora, and then coming back home and just, getting engaged in grassroots organizing here in Hawaii, the effects of colonization are rampant and they're devastating. The number of Kanaka Maoli who are houseless in our own homeland is just incredible. And then the rates of QTPIs within that population is even higher, right? So one of the things that I, as someone who's survived houselessness and precarious housing as a youth, as a trans youth in Washington State, I think it's also part of my kuleana now as a doctor to go into communities and to provide direct services, because they don't exist currently in Hawaii. So I think one of the things that we can do, that anybody can do, just, in general, is to just aloha ke kahi I ke kahi. And in Hawaiian, that means to love one another. So if you see somebody who's hungry, or who needs, support, go support them. It's kind of like that idea. If you see dirty dishes in the sink, you go wash them. And so, and people are doing that here through a Hawaiian cultural lens in terms of reclaiming our ohana, reclaiming our aina. Like Auntie Twinkle, for example, creating pu'uhonua o Wai'anae here in the Wai'anae. And creating a space where people who are displaced and houseless can actually go home to a place that they call home without fear of being displaced, right? And we see the forces of displacement being carried out by militarized police in places like Seattle, in places like California, right? And, basic access to housing, as you all know, is fundamental for people to feel safe. Right. We need to make sure that people have a safe place to sleep. And, sleep is important. If people can't sleep, they cannot survive. right? So the criminalization of sleeping is really problematic, and that also has racial implications. It has implications along the lines of gender and sexual minorities. And so I think it's really important that, you know, we continue to create spaces like this as well, these Talanoa or talk story spaces where people can, you know, talk about the challenges that they're facing, and also, you know, provide steps forward. How do we overcome the trauma? How do we move forward together where we're not just thinking about me, but the we in the me, right? Because in every me is a we. And I think that's something as Pacific Islanders we understand, and that's something that we live every day. And I think that's something we can be so proud of, and that's something that we want to share in whatever space we're holding, you know. So yeah, mahalo.
Thank you so much for that, like, very intense, I guess, overview. I'm sorry, but for lack of a better word, but you know, you did touch on a very important part with displacement to our youth, especially for the queer and trans community, as we're continually being discriminated against. You know, these mental issues that affect us so much, you know, are mostly with emotion, and these can be emotions of thoughts of suicide, depression, anxiety, as it all relates to displacement and I guess the lack of acceptance from our families, our loved ones, and those who, you know, who you would expect to have your back 24/7. I mean, like, this is, it's important. It's also why I'm so passionate about this as a venue for discussion, so that we can sort of come up with ways to get over that hurdle. So thank you for bringing that up. That's an eye opener for me.
Yeah, it was really amazing, especially when you pointed out about the importance of conversations such as Talanoa.
So sorry to pop
Like,
in your
these
lane.
are, but like these are the spaces that helps create strategies about how to better certain situations that are helpful, like are happening in our own community. So I wanted to move on to Joe. Joe, did you have like a input on this, on what are some behavioral health issues that some of our queer trans-Pacific Islanders are facing?
Yeah, I mean, Kalani, nice way to wrap it up. I love your analysis, Kalani. I mean, you know, I think a lot of times, systems and people within those systems blame our communities for a lot of the ways that harm shows up in our communities, right? And we often blame our own parents or blame our older siblings, for the harm that exists within Pacifica communities. But we have to always take it into context, right, of colonialism, white supremacy, and how rape and domestic violence and all of that was really ushered in, right? As white supremacy came over the Pacific, right? And that culture of violence became very entrenched in the ways that our communities now think it's part of our culture, right? We now are convinced that, you know, that beating your kids is something, you know, is love, which we know our ancestors, we know in the historical documents that none of our ancestors did any of that, right? But we're so convinced that that's part of our culture. And then when it comes to us at the intersection of being queer and trans and Fa'afafine and Leiti and Kela, right? That violence is even more pronounced, right? And so I think we get caught up in those webs. And I think as younger cutie pies, sometimes, you know, white queer culture tells us to turn away from our families and our communities and our churches, which we know now those are safe, those are protective factors, right, for us. And a lot of the ways that harm has shown up is because our families and communities have always lacked the resources that they need to really be well, right? And so what does it mean? And you know, cutie pies, we're going back, you know, we're not running away. We're going back in our communities and we're saying, you know, we are going to heal our community. And you're right, Kalani, it's not the I, right? And I think for Mahu, Fa'afafine, Like D, all our queer baby people will really start to understand our critical role in the healing of our communities, right? And so, yeah, just really, really love how you frame that, Talanoa.
And that's a perfect summary. I mean, your response, Joseph, is a perfect way to segue into our last question for the sake of timing. So I'll pass it on to Virginia, and I'll start by asking what types of services do you think need to be implemented to improve the mental and behavioral well-being of queer and trans-Pacific Islander communities, or Islanders, sorry.
Thank you. Here, particularly in Oregon, we do not have a Pacific Islander Cultural Center. We don't have any clinics that are really focused on serving Pacific Islander health. And I think it's time. It's really time that we get some funding. Some organizations have been trying to fundraise and find donors in order for us to be able to have a space that we can call our own. And in my research, in my lived experience, in my children's lived experience, most of the time what I hear from people is the need to be in a place that is safe, inclusive, and accepting of who we are, right? Like I always hear how, for example, cyberbullying, right, is huge for our youth. They're constantly inundated with these images of what you're supposed to look like, right? And as they're going through their journey with who am I, with my sexual identity, with my gender identity, all of that, right? Feeling really awkward and weird and not knowing what is acceptable, and feeling like they cannot be themselves because they're afraid that their family and friends are not going to accept them, right? Or if they do try to tell their family and friends, some of these family and friends, they don't have the language to talk about this, right? They don't have the open-mindedness to say, I love you as who you are, right? Even for my own family, having trans boys, I've had to say multiple times, this is my son's name, right? Do not dead name them. This is harmful in these ways, right? And some of my families are like, that's the name that your child was born with. And I'm like, that doesn't matter, right? My child's health and safety matters most. Like, you don't understand what my child has been through. We have too many queer and trans youth who have suicidal ideation, who have attempted suicide, because they feel like they have no outlet. They have nowhere to go. And we just, they're afraid because we see so many, queer and trans people murdered, right? And they're like, am I next, right? Like that constant fear inside of them, afraid of being who they are. And we really need to provide spaces where we can help them, with saying, we love you, we honor you, we value you for who you are, and that you have a place to be loved. So that's what I would say.
And that's that's really all anyone wants out of life is validation, acceptance, love, to have a sense of belonging. So I hope that with time, more and more spaces open up in your area, out in Portland, where, queer and trans folks can find a home around navigating through these situations.
And with these resources and these spaces, it's always good to have a space, especially for our youth members, especially for our youth who are queer, trans, and queer Pacific Islanders. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Virginia. I wanted to ask the same question to Natia. What are your thoughts about what types of services or programs do you think needs to be implemented to improve the mental and behavioral well-being of queer and trans Pacific Islanders?
Well, I totally agree with what Virginia had said, and I just want to say I'm so sorry if my connection was running bad, and so it got booted out. But I do think that funding needs to go into. I think what needs to be implemented is support groups ran by individuals inside our community. So QTPIs, I think they should be running these support groups. Just I feel like someone who is experiencing any type of, I just feel like it'd be so much better with someone who who understands the group and understands what's going on and what could be said and what needs to be said and how to facilitate a conversation. I know for myself, I was in a lot of support groups, and it was ran, and the way that they were ran and facilitated was awesome. It was beautiful. It was so engaging for us to easily talk about our mental health and how we were feeling that day, or traumas that we were going through, and it was like we could easily talk to one another, and if I have to go back to my diary and the blog that I write, that's what it was for. The diary was when I wrote everything, it was to reach out to whoever was reading it, and whoever identified with it. If they did, I was like, great. Even in the support group, I was no one was gonna go around the room and say, do you identify with it? If someone said something and you identify with it, at least you know that someone is out there and is going through the same thing. You don't have to vocalize it. But I think that's very important because there's not enough of that. I don't run into a lot of my Pacific Islander friends who are talking about their mental health. And I think it comes from a place of silence. I think that's really negative. That's a negative thing inside our community is the silence culture that goes on, where everything is just swept under the rug or just not said. And it's very problematic. And people aren't really taking consideration what their own feelings are. They're just trying to blend in with the mold. And they're suffering inside. I shouldn't say everyone's suffering inside because everyone's going through their own journey. I just feel like it's just very problematic. So that's really what I think could be put out there, is just kind of social.
Well, thank you for sharing that, too. I think that was phenomenal when you talked about.
Yeah, that's really that's what I would have.
How has the response been in light of your the diary that you put out? I'm curious to see if it was how much support came about putting that out, especially when you're so public in that way. You don't exactly know who's watching or who's looking at it, so it's hard to sort of pinpoint what the perception is.
I've had a mixture of it. I've had a mixture. I've had a lot of good response. A lot of people have reached out because in the diary and how it's structured is I'm going back to the very beginning when I was very young, and I'm taking it all the way back up to recent years when I was a teenager. I was 20 when I decided to transition, and so it's been a good response. I've had a few people who have just been really negative. I think the most interesting is the response from my family. I have had members of my family who were very angry with me for being so public about my life, and I always had to question them about, I was like, why are you upset? Are you upset at me, or are you upset at who in the family you feel has done that? And you're just mad at me for putting them on blast. That's always just kind of sat in the back of my mind about the response that I usually get from my family. I'm not worried about, I could care less about the people that have something negative to say about my experience because you're not living my experience, so therefore you're irrelevant. But those who have taken in and it sat with them and they feel so compelled to share nice, kind words, I appreciate it and I accept it. And those who have expressed to me that they're going through similar situations, because I always like to think that though I'm going through something, someone's going through so much worse, and if I can at least share a part of myself with them and they feel a little bit more better, that they're not alone, then I feel like I've accomplished something. And I didn't write this blog for attention. I really just wrote it for myself to like get it out there, especially when you get a complete thought out. I'm like, this is a complete event that happened to me. I'm putting it out there. I've written it all out. I was like, there's no missing details. I'm sharing it. I'm letting it go. I was like, and now I feel a little bit. I know I feel a little bit more relieved that I don't have to. I don't have this weight here on me, and I'm happy that people who read it understand that, and that they continue to share their lives with me. I think I also stopped. It was very hard for me to. There's been some hard situations with the response. A lot of people who have. I've had a friend who had passed away due to suicide, and the last thing that was read that they had read was my blog, and they felt more at peace with the situation. And I didn't know how to necessarily take that. When I was told that, I didn't like. I don't know. I would be like, how would you like take that if someone had said that? I didn't take it in a negative way. Because I felt like at the end of the day, like they had said that I helped them. But it was kind of hard. It was kind of like threw me for like a curveball. I didn't know how to respond to that. So I took a break from writing for a minute because of that. And that's some of the responses that I get. Sometimes I'll take a break from like writing because sometimes things just get really heavy, and you got to take a step back and just reflect on life and like how else you're going to get through the next day and how else you're going to get through your next trauma and what happens when another response like this comes out and what exactly am I doing to make sure that people feel more secure that they can go and reach for help physically in their lives.
And like, yeah, I guess I just want to thank you for, your visibility. But definitely a break is always needed. Take a break, but please don't give up because, you have the power to impact someone's life, whatever it is that they're going through. And you go public with this kind of, with your storytelling. You never know how it can be perceived, and it may come to you as a surprise the way that it did for the individual who unfortunately committed suicide. So I'm terribly sorry for your loss in that regard. And I encourage you to please not give up on this. But yeah, to move on, I'd like to toss it over to Joseph. I think, Joseph, would you like to close us out of the panel? We'll ask you the same question.
What types of services or programs do you think needs to be implemented to improve the mental and behavioral well-being of our queer and trans-Pacific Islanders?
Your sister likes to dream. And one of my dreams is that we will have a Pacifica queer and trans community wellness clinic, right? With our own doctors, our own therapists, our traditional healers, right? And we're all over. We're on the walls. We're in a therapeutic session. We're weaving mats. We're creating siapo. We're making our cultural foods. A girl can dream. And then right outside, there's like, land for us to grow food. Maybe get some taro, grow some taro out there. And also like space for our elders and our youth and our queer people at the center of our culture, right? Because I think that's where our people have been prior to colonization, right? And part of our work is to really, help our community understand really the roles of queer and trans Pacific Islanders. And so everybody go vote for the census, go, do the census thing so we can get some money. Yeah. But yeah, thank you all. Thank you, Adri, Tweety, Virginia, everybody. Thank you.
Guys.
Gosh, so sorry I missed it.
But before we let you go, I'm sorry. Yeah, before we let, there's something wrong.
Thanks for having me.
Can you guys hear us?
Okay. Yeah, before we let you go,
Yes.
I just want to say thank you all so much for taking the time to meet with us, especially to have this important discussion. Definitely respond to the 2020 census. ASAP, our deadline is fast approaching this September 30th. So in order for us to once again wishfully thinking, garner everything that Joseph just mentioned in a perfect world within the next 10 years, this is the chance to do it. And you can do it by responding directly to the census. So mahalo very much to our special guests for joining us this evening. It's been a pleasure having all of you. We wish you all well from the bottom of our hearts here at Utopia and all of you at home. Adrienne, any last thoughts?
Yeah, we just had some amazing conversations and a lot of points and ideas about what's going on with our community members, especially with our mental behavioral health issues that we have and ways that we can better this. So, and for this to all happen, you need to make sure you fill out your census. Go get counted. It only takes 10 minutes of your time. You can do it online. You can mail it in. You can call it in. All this information would be available to you if you're interested, or if you have not filled out your census, it would be on any of our social media pages on Facebook or on Instagram or on Twitter. So, and if you haven't yet, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button.
Thank you so much. And good luck with all of the great work that you're doing out there. Don't give up. Keep up the good fight. And we love you guys so much.
Mahalo.
And for those of you at home, we have one final video to sign us off here. A little message from our modest staff here at Utopia Seattle. So make sure you respond to the 2020 census and definitely register to vote. The election is coming up next month, but the general election will definitely happen Tuesday, November 3rd. You don't want to miss out.
Thank you.
Toodaloo, everybody. Have a good evening. The 2020 census is nearly over. We have until September 30th to get counted.
The census data will be used to fund hundreds of programs that will benefit our loved ones,
such as medical services, so that we can continue to receive treatment and care. If we do not respond now, we miss out.
All it takes is just 10 minutes of your time.
You can go online at www.my2020census.gov or call the toll-free number at 844-330-2020.
What are you waiting for?